to me, and he was a brilliant guy. And he used to say, we start the religion science thing the wrong way because it's too much a polar opposition, that we should work on the recovery of philosophy as a rational path. And what I think he meant was a lot of people, especially young people, think the only rational path is the scientific one. Those are simply coterminous. To be rational is to be a follower of the scientific method. And so if religion isn't that, well, then it must be irrational. Well, if it introduced philosophy as indeed a rational path, the most brilliant people in the tradition have practiced it, but it's not a scientific path. It's rational without being scientific. And that might open the door, Cardinal George used to say, to thinking about religion as also a rational path that's not scientific. I think it's hard for younger people to imagine what that is. Rational means scientific.
Well, we can help them out to some degree. I mean, I titled my first book "Maps of Meaning" for a very specific reason, is that this narrative structure is a map.
Yeah.
What that means, if that's true, and I do believe it's true, and I studied a lot of the early work on hippocampal function from animal researchers, and they made some real fundamental discoveries in the field of cognition. It's like we need a map to traverse the world. It's not optional. Without a map, you're lost, and to be lost is a terrible thing. And so, and there's rationality in the development of a map. There better be, because otherwise it doesn't get you to where you want to go. And you certainly want to get away from being lost, let's say. And science is not a map. It's a description of the terrain without direction.
Yeah.
There's direction there, I suppose, but it's implicit. The scientists impose that direction by following the dictates of their intuition of meaning. But science itself doesn't offer a map.
Yeah. Right.
Well, there's no rationality outside of science. Okay, well, they let the irrational people design the map. Well, that's what's happening with the politicization of our culture.
Yeah. Right.
And so the religion, and then the rationalists, they say, well, if we weren't religious and we weren't superstitious, well, everyone would be rational, and wouldn't the world be a better place? And I think, no, the religious would drop into the political. And then you watch what happens, and we are watching what happens.
That has happened.
Because there's no domain for the religious now, no specified domain. So tiny things become imbued with religious significance because there's no proper place, right? And that's not good. And so it's not that. It's not impossible. I mean, I don't see a flaw in this claim. I can't see a flaw in it. It's like, don't we need a map? Well, can science provide that map? I've never heard a thoroughly critical, scientifically trained, deep philosopher make the case that science can provide the direction for ethical behavior. And that's the map. What's good? Where should we head? So, well, then what do we do with that? There's nothing? There's nothing? There's no map?
No, and that's why I objected so much to that claim that science belongs in the highest place, that physical sciences are the queen of the sciences. That can't be right, because that's saying the one that can't provide the map is governing all the other ways of knowing, and that can't be right. But I think we have lost a sense of that. And again, I think as a religious person, I'll take some responsibility. I think we have not been great at providing the map, and we have to recover that for sure.
Well, Bishop, I think this follows from what you and Jordan were talking about. One of the problems about invoking philosophy is which one do you mean? Do you mean academic philosophy, or do you mean the philosophy that Pierre Hadot has brought back? Where
that one I think is better. Yeah, it's a way of life.
Well, yes, and what I would point to is that points us to a kind of what's the difference between the academic philosophy, and I have training in that, and philosophy as a way of life. And it goes to points that Jonathan was making about the how much the transformation. Look, the Cartesian claim is that all truths are available to a method. If you go to earlier, the Neoplatonic tradition, right? It's like, no. There are some truths that will only be disclosed if you go through fundamental transformation. And then so we have to talk about the rationality of transformation, which is about, the procedural, the perspectival, the participatory transformation. And the thing about this, and this is what's really exciting, is a lot of the work is showing that, I got a series that right now with Greg Enriquez and Zach Stein, that you can't infer your way through transformation. This goes to, I mean, the person who wrote the book on this is L.A. Paul. I know Laurie, she's a great philosopher. Tight analytic argument to make the point, you can't infer your way through a transformative process. And so you have to ask the question, okay, is it just willy-nilly? No, what do human beings actually do? What kind of rationality? Agnes Callard did this in her book on aspiration. She calls it proleptic rationality. What is the rationality? What does it look like when people are, going through fundamental transformations in order to conform to reality? That's their way of getting at the truth rather than marshaling a method. And so I go back to my point again, we need to expand the notion of rationality and the way it was exemplified in Philia Sophia rather than the way it is exemplified, I would say, in still to a large degree, academic philosophy. I went into...
Yeah, I agree. Can I invoke your...
The academic philosophers have the same problem that Bishop Barron described about the priesthood.
Yeah. But
that's how it looks.
Could I invoke your
to me.
Your countryman again, Lonergan? We had those 4 imperatives. If you want to know the world, you've got to be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, and be responsible. And he describes all 4 of those. But his point was, we tend not to be those 4 things. The mind is fallen. It falls away from attention. It doesn't see what's there. Or even like, John, to use your stuff, it doesn't maybe make the right siphoning moves to say, let me be attentive to the right things. Mm-hmm. It's not intelligent, which for him meant it doesn't have insights. So it doesn't discern intelligible form. It's not reasonable, meaning it doesn't make judgments. So I'm looking at a phenomenon, I say it could be this, could be this, could be that, but I never make the judgment to say, no, that's truly what this thing is. And then finally, it's not responsible, meaning it doesn't follow up the implications of its judgments. But what he was getting from his own Christian tradition, I think, was the deep sense of the fallenness of the mind. The mind is, it's not a wreck, but it's compromised, and it needs to go through a disciplinary process. It has to go, and that's, I think, what Pierre Hadot and those people are recovering from the ancient world, is you had to go through. Plato's Academy was not a classroom where you sit and take in Plato's theory of the forms. It was a way of life, and you learned a manner of being and knowing and so on. So I think that's true in any intellectual discipline. You've got to be converted. And you have to acknowledge, and we have to acknowledge your sin in a way, that your mind is not what it should be, and you got to go through a discipline.